Gargoyles watch with stony gaze, guardians of endless maze. Pipe organ's breath begins to rise, filling air with mournful ties. Whispering shadows secrets keep in the depths where night meets sleep. Underneath the velvet gloom, guardians of the haunted room.
Good afternoon, everybody. Now, if I've managed to do this right, this should all be working, and it's Friday, and we are here. How's everybody doing? I can see most of the usual suspects have gathered. I think I've caught most of you as you've hopped into chat. For those who I haven't, good afternoon. Glad to see you here. I hope you're ready for some more nonsense. It's going to be some real nonsense this week because they've left me on my own. It's just me right now, so I'm gonna break everything and witter a lot, and you guys are kind of stuck with me. We do also have PupCam, yes. Give me a moment, I will see if I can make PupCam bigger. They're not doing anything exciting at the moment. They are in that nest somewhere. We went out for our outside playtime because they're now big enough to actually go outside and see the sunshine, and they're now very exhausted from experiencing grass. So sleepy puppies at the minute, but if they don't wake up before the end of stream, I do promise I'll get up and go and rouse them so they can say hi to you guys. You had a great date last night, Ramshackle? That's wonderful. I hoped you talked about many exciting things. Night owl, you need to sleep. Puppas need their walkies and play out time outside. Yes, they're not big enough yet to go for walks. Technically speaking, we're not supposed to take them outside till they're 6 weeks old, and they're only 5 weeks old, but we have a very calm, quiet, nice neighborhood. There's nothing particularly untoward going on the grass on our front lawn, so I took a blanket outside and I took them in their crate, and then they played all over it, and I might just upload some videos later on in the Legion and in the Orc, so if people want to see what they were getting up to. Need time for walkies when they're just a little bit bigger. Aside from lack of sleep, doing fine. Oh god, top quarter of the box that lost power. That's, oh goodness. I hope it gets resolved soon if it hasn't already. Puppa videos, I can do Puppa videos. That will certainly come. But we are also here to witter about other things this week, not just the puppies. And as I say, I will wake them up a little bit later on. I was very fortunate this week to have enough time to really go over some of the stuff that we did from last week. So when we get to covering Shoal a little bit later on, we'll probably get to it a little bit sooner than we have done the last couple of weeks. Look over some of the bits that we did last week, flesh them out a bit more and some of the changes. One of the coolest things happened this week. Some immense nerdism was broken out over in the Legion, where Ninja Turtle, who streams on Sundays, for those of you who haven't caught him yet, did something incredibly nerdy and wonderful for us that I'm hoping to be able to share with you when he's ready. He went into a simulator and built Shoal's star system, and was able to get Shoal properly orbiting a gas giant along with most of the companion moons that should also be there. And it was so cool. It was incredibly nerdy and incredibly cool. he managed to get the model so that not only was the gas giant orbiting the star, which did in fact need to be a white star rather than a yellow. It's slightly further away from the star than Earth is from the sun. He got the mapping going, and then he was following the orbit of Shoal as the whole system was in movement for like multiple years while we were all in the stream together. And watching all of the moons, it was like watching this dance of little spiraling ballet dancers around the gas giant as it then circled around the sun. And one of the things that he had to do to make sure that the ocean stayed liquid all year long was to vary the orbit with a slight sort of up-down eccentricity. So we've got a very slight sort of wave on Shoal's orbit. So the pattern, when you see it all in motion, just looks stunning. And once he did that, I was able to visualize to solve some of the problems we thought we might have with, you know, what constitutes a day, what would the seasons be like, and how would we map those, and all of these other things all fell into place. So I've got some cool stuff to show you guys this week, and Ninja Turtle is amazing. He did such a good job. Tired German, we're probably not going to do full calendar simulations, but we do now have a concept of what a calendar situation would look like on the planet, and how we might want to track that, so that will be fun. Wasn't 100% sure it was possible to get those orbital periods to work together. Technically speaking, the orbit is faster than what we're saying it is for Shoal's system, but I'm very happy to just hand wavium that. It doesn't make a difference in a meaningful way. And by that I mean the year length it takes Luastra to orbit the star Mern. It's a bit faster than it is in the setting that we're building, but that in itself, not a problem. The orbits of the moons works perfectly well. It looked really, really cool, and I can't wait for it to be in a position where you guys get to see it. Is he really a ninja and a turtle? We will never know until we get that Stig-like helmet off of him, and I'm not brave enough to try. Figuring out a calendar is useful world building. Yeah, when we get to the stuff that I've done in the downtime since I was last sat with you guys, the way I'm envisioning that we'll do a calendar to work for storytelling purposes will make a lot more sense, and thankfully will not need to be based in hard science and numbers, because as Wilf says, we're not doing super hard sci-fi. We've got psionics happening in this system. We can have a little bit of bend and flexibility. So I think we're going to go with a narrative calendar rather than a scientific calendar. But we'll get to that when we get to it. We've got some other stuff to do first. And speaking of that, I'm going to move PupCam because it's going to be in the way over there for what I want to do next. So let me bring it over here. It can come and hang out with my big old skull that I drew. Because I'd like to open this week, seeing as I've been left to my own devices and nobody can stop me, with talking about one of my favourite games, Subnautica, which, how many of you guys in chat have played Subnautica or seen it? Let's see. Brewster Buffalo's completed it. Yep, excellent. And tested VR. Yeah, I've played a little bit of it in VR. I didn't feel like it was necessary. I didn't feel like it was something I had to do, but it was very cool. People played it and loved it. Seen it but haven't played it. Never played it. Okay, so Ramshackle's not familiar. Never seemed to get much beyond the mid-game. Fair enough. And that might be an interesting conversation to have in a few minutes. Didn't they make a hyper-realistic version? There are some videos online where people made like fan videos, almost like movies, that are very realistic, and there's a whole load of mods that can really change what the graphics look like, but the base game, you know, if you play it as is, it's just as is. Swimming feels weird in VR. I agree, it very much does. The popular work that most here will likely compare Shoal to. Yes, and there's definitely going to be some elements that are going to be similar between Subnautica and Shoal, and that's why we're going to explore the bits that will make Shoal unique and interesting, because Subnautica 1 doesn't have giant mecha stomping around in it and psionic coral that sings to people. We all have that. We'll have to see what Subnautica 2 is going to bring, though. If anybody hasn't heard, there is a second game on the way, which will be interesting. Remember to say hello to Randy the Safety Reaper, but don't forget your hard hat. Very important. You must wear your hard hat. Prawn Suit has entered the chat. Love the prawn suits. They're such a good time. The reefback is close enough to singing coral. What I love with the reefbacks is that if you honk your horn on your submarine in Subnautica, the reefback leviathans will rumble back at you, which is very, very nice. Will Kevin Costner be in Shoal? Truthfully, that is up to you guys. Because my grand hope for anyone who's here and is not sure what the hell is going on, what I'm wittering about, my grand hope for this setting that we're building together is that when we get to sort of October, November, which is the time of year where writing is a big focus, is that you guys will be invested enough that you'd also like to do some writing. So if you want to write Kevin Costner into Shoal, you can. I'm going to bring up some background music here, seeing as I'm on my own. You guys will let me know if it's too loud or too quiet. I'm going to go with about there, and you guys let me know. It is good to analyse and understand how Subnautica works as a work of fiction, where the strengths and weaknesses are. Yeah, that's exactly what I would love to do this week, if that's agreeable with you guys, and, you know, I don't bore you all to tears. Down 20% can do, Kai, can do. How's that? Any better? We will find out. I'm sure Kai will let me know. He's very helpful like that. Perfect. Wonderful. So, one of the things... I'm going to talk for a little bit as if you guys are not familiar with Subnautica, for those few who aren't. Ramshackle, what's Shoal about? Really, that's still kind of somewhat up in the air and in our hands, but the main focus of the setting for me when I sat down and originally came up with the idea for Shoal. Let me back up a bit. So, where did Shoal come from? Going back last year when I was just getting started with my art career, and you guys being the wonderful community that you are and enjoying my nonsense shitposting, there's a thing in the art community called Mer-May. And Mer-May is when you spend the month of May drawing mermaids. And I was interested in doing that last year because I knew I wasn't going to have time to do Inktober in October, which is like the big art thing that a lot of people do, because I knew I'd be doing a goob piece. So I thought, well, maybe I'll do a art challenge in May instead, and I'll do Mer-May. But of course, I wanted to make it something that was unique and would actually help to build my skills, be relevant to the sort of stuff that I do. So I thought to myself, well, what if I did mermaids, but I built mecha into it. So they were either mecha mermaids or a mer race that used underwater mecha. And underwater mecha does seem to be one of those areas that's not explored as much. You get a lot of mechs in space, mechs on land, not quite so much mechs underwater, though of course there are some very well-known mechs that are underwater mechs, but it's not been as explored. So that was where my line of thinking went down, and then of course I got really busy, and that just thank you, Kai. And, I got really busy, and it just, Mer-May was not going to happen. So I put the idea on the back burner, including this concept of a setting that these pictures would take place in, these paintings that I wanted to do. And then, I think it was beginning of November last year, Task Force Delta Crayon bullied me into agreeing to stream. And now we're here! Yes, the Duchy of Zeon has a ton of aquatic mechs. Those were the ones I was thinking of. And if anybody has seen Razophon, there are some underwater dolems in that I was aware of growing up. So once I got bullied into streaming, and I was like, well, I don't want to do art because we've got Striker and Crispy and all of these other people who do art. And the way that I draw is really boring. If I did an art stream, all you guys would be looking at is a really zoomed in piece of art with me redrawing the same line like 6 times until I'm satisfied with it. So I thought, well, my main passion's actually writing. Art is my second passion. It's just the one that makes me the money. Writing is the one that I enjoy the most. So we decided we'd do a writing stream, and I thought, well, Shoal's sitting right there on the shelf and hasn't been explored and expanded, and I bet chat can do some interesting things with that, and now we're here. Tired German, that sounds amazing. Yes, please. Speaking of the orcs, I'm going to go and grab a link that I can post. If you caught the newsletter that went out, I think it was yesterday, there is now a newsletter. You can find it in the announcement section. And Shoal was highlighted in there, which promised that there was going to be some channels that we could do things on the orcs to talk about Shoal. You guys can give me more ideas, and where you guys can find a PDF of what we've done so far, which has gone up. I did that yesterday, and I'm going to grab, if I can, a link and stick it in chat so that you guys can find where to put stuff in the orcs. And yeah, by all means, please send me your ideas. Let me know what I'm doing right and what I'm doing wrong. And if I can find the pin button. Unable to pin. Something went wrong. Gosh darn it. Will it let me do it from over here? Okay, well it won't let me pin that, so I will just have to pop it up periodically to let you guys know where to go. So that's where Shoal world building is going to continue from. It will let you guys see what we've done so far so that you can keep up to date with what's happening, where we're at, what we're trying to do. And the overall goal is I'd love to tell some stories about the world that we're building. For me, storytelling always comes down to stories are a way of understanding and experiencing what it is to be human and what it is to be alive. It's a way that we have the ability for one person's personal world inside your head, your thoughts, your experiences, the way you perceive reality, to be transplanted to somebody else, including through the veil of time. We can read works that people wrote hundreds of years ago and still understand where they were coming from, and that will continue hundreds of years into the future, which I think is, you know, a pretty awesome thing. So whenever I write anything, even if it's a fantasy setting, I'm always thinking about what's the message that I want to deliver, what's the theme that I want to deliver, what ideas am I exploring. And when we're building a world like this that's so different from our own world, I mean, the orbit is going to be different, which is going to have affected how their science develops, their concept of their place in the universe. And there's no way they're ever going to go through a period where the people of Shoal think that Shoal is the center of the universe. They've got too much going on in the night sky to ever have that concept. So it's going to be very different. But what does that tell us about what it is to be alive, what it is to experience reality, and what it is to have an imagination and share things with other people, have an audience who is receptive to hearing these things. So I'd love to tell some individual stories. Once we get to the culture section where we start actually building our sentient species and what's the cultures like, what's the state of the world like, what are the concerns that these people have, are they in a resource deficit so it's become a very warlike world, or is this a world that's got higher ideals in other areas? What is the state of existence that informs what matters to the people that we're inventing? At that point we'll know some more of the direction of where we want our individual stories to go. But always, for me, it's always about connecting with other human beings and the state of being alive and getting through this ridiculous thing called existence. So that's where we are with that. And yes, beware the Droptopus. The Droptopus will get you. The Seacons, I will have to look them up. Transformers is a series I'm aware of, but I'm aware of it in the way that I was a child who grew up in the 80s. I'm not actually a Transformers nerd, so I don't know nearly as much about it as I should. So I will have to look into that. Tired German, if you want to scan that and post it in the orcs in the channel that has been linked, that would be the best place to put it. I can't wait to see it. That would be really, really cool. So, winding our way back from Shoal, because we're going to move on to that in a little while, I wanted to talk today a bit about Subnautica, because Subnautica has genius world building. And I think we can learn a lot from it, and I think it's worth talking about. And as I say, people left me on my own to do what the hell I wanted to do, and that can only end poorly. So I'm going to talk about it for a little bit. as if you guys have no idea what it is for the few people here who don't, and then we'll sort of build up on that. And if you guys have any opinions, as always, I would love to see them. This is a bit more of a podcasty stream than some of the others on the channel, and I do enjoy seeing what you guys have to say. So, for the uninitiated, Subnautica is a game where you are playing a character named Riley in first-person view, and you are on a starship off to go and do a job for the mega corporation that you work for, when your ship gets shot out of orbit and you crash land on an ocean world and you're on your own in a survival pod. It's a survival crafting game where from square one you need to just dive into the ocean, start finding the resources that you need to survive and try to find a way back home. As you go along, you're kind of like, I really hope there's other survivors. There aren't other survivors. You'll get messages from them, but all of the pods have scattered when you land. And as you try to reconnect with everybody, you find out the varying ways that everybody else who survived the crash did not survive the planet that you're on. It's a very dangerous planet for multiple reasons. And Subnautica builds itself up to this story that it's telling through incremental challenges that you have to overcome and incremental revelations about the ecology of the world and why it's in the state that it's in. So, yep, the game starts with you are shot out of orbit at the very beginning of the game. You are literally in the process of crashing when the game opens to the first screen that you see. And you're racing to the escape pod, and then you get in your escape pod, you're knocked out. When you come to, you climb out of the escape pod and you can see the ship that you were on, the Aurora, has crashed on the planet in front of you and is a smoking, still burning ruin. And now everything's going wrong and it's all on you to sort yourself out. You have a handy dandy data pad, which is the first genius piece of world building that Subnautica does. The reason why that's genius is because it's the first thing that talks to you, and it becomes, because of that, the first thing that you sort of bond with in a, this thing will help me, this thing is my guide, this thing is my friend and my companion. It tells you what you need to do, it kind of tells you, you know, who you are, what you were doing, why you're here, and gives you the guidance you need to start surviving in a setting that tells you nothing at the onset. You don't know what job you were doing, you don't know exactly what was going on, and as it turns out that will come to be very relevant because Riley, the character you're playing, was not a well-placed higher up on the ship. He's a relatively, you know, menial labourer effectively. So you have this data pad that can explain things to you, the player, who doesn't know what's going on, at the same time as kind of your character doesn't know what's going on. So you've immediately had this sort of bonding moment with the avatar that you're experiencing in the game. It also helps that the datapad has a very enjoyable voice to listen to, and it's very deadpan, as are all of the mechanical voices in the game, which means the moments where they deliver comedy are doubly funny because it's completely deadpan when it comes through. When you jump into the ocean of Subnautica, which will be the second thing that you do after waking up and listening to what your datapad has to tell you, you get the second genius moment of world building, because you've gone from, I don't know what's going on, but it's okay, I've got this datapad that's going to tell me, to I'm on a place I don't know, and you're going to get a first impression. This is like anything else in life. You know, you meet somebody for the first time, you open a present, whatever it is you happen to be doing, your first impression will help to colour everything that comes afterwards, because that's your initial experience. And while you might change your opinion as time goes on, this is your foundational block that you need to start from. And Subnautica's ocean that you dive into is beautiful. You jump unless you're immediately terrified. If you are, you duck back into the pub and shake like a leaf. Yeah, one of my best friends has quite significant thalassophobia for very good reason, after an accident when he was young. And he can play raft, he can just about manage raft, but Subnautica, even jumping into the shallows, he just can't do it. And he has to put it down and walk away. And we'll talk about why that works so well in a minute. I did touch on it last week, but when you jump into Subnautica's ocean, it's stunning. You've got crystal clear blue azure water. You've got colourful corals underneath you and white sand. It's a tropical ocean. So it's immediately somewhat calming, even though you're surrounded by alien fish. Now, the picture I've chosen to put up on screen is a shot from the game. This is what a lot of the things in the game look like. And you've got one of the types of fish on the screen there with Riley. It's a nice colourful blue fish with a yellow pattern and, a nice little bit of glow going on the tail. It's a lovely looking fish until you pause and really look at it. And then you see the sharp teeth on the front. You don't notice those teeth when you first jump in, but if you pay attention and as you get more used to this new setting that you're in, you start to notice the hidden dangers. So the area that you start in is known as the safe shallows. And safe is a relative term. Compared to everywhere else in the game, yes, these are the safe shallows, but they're not completely safe. And the game starts you off with dealing with some very human, very understandable problems to overcome to help you start to get acquainted with its world and what it is that the game wants from you. It starts you off with hunger and thirst, which for a survival game aficionados, people who love them, and they are one of my favourite genres, the hunger and thirst systems in survival games make or break them as a game. And we're not really here to talk about game design, that's not what my streams are about, but Subnautica balances them really well and does something that all survival crafting games should do, which is make the mechanics of what the game wants you to do to survive relevant to the story that it's trying to tell you. The two should be interwoven. And they're really nicely interwoven in Subnautica. You need to eat, you need to drink, you've got the bare minimum you need to get started, long enough to start catching your own fish and figuring out what you need to do. And of course the problem is, you are now on an ocean world. All of the water here is salty, you can't drink it. But this is where your handy data pad and the fact that it's clear that you're in a futuristic setting, because you've arrived here by spaceship, comes into play. You have the ability to desalinate the water. And there's several ways you can do this. One of the ways is by finding some materials that you can use to do that. You'll make sort of bleach and disinfect water that way, and do various things if you use some of the corals that are available beneath you and some other items. But you've also got a unique kind of fish called a bladderfish, which is not in this picture, but the bladderfish is a nice, very easy to see pink fish that's translucent. So you're going to end up picking one up because your monkey brain is going to go, oh, what's that, and touch it. And then your character's going to proceed to lick the science, because when you take it into your pod, you find out that you can turn a bladderfish into bottled water. Bladderfish process the water to a state where it's drinkable and you can survive on it. So we've already started setting up how the ecology of this world works through what you're being expected to understand as the audience member. You need to find different fish to help you survive your initial problems, food and hunger, and you've got some weird alien fish and they're going to help you. You then consistently build on this problem with new problems as you move along, with the ultimate goal, of course, of getting off the planet. And in doing so, you're going to find out what happened. So with your initial needs met, the next big thing that's really going to draw your attention is the smouldering wreck of your ship that you cannot help but see the moment you exit the pod. Partially this is due to the fact that the very first time you leave the pod, whether you leave into the water through the bottom or go and sit up on top of it through the hatch in the top, when you go through each of those, you're going to have your gaze directed to things that the game initially wants you to engage with, which when you go into the water, it's this beautiful, stunning ocean, and oh look, there are some mushrooms down there. You should pick those up. I'm sure those will be useful. They are, the acid mushrooms they use to make batteries. And when you exit through the top, your view will be forced to look at the ship that you came on. So at some point, your monkey brain is going to go, I should go and try and lick that as well and find out what happens. And what happens when you go to try and lick the ship is you find out that oh god, radiation. It is leaking radiation, and this is going to be sort of your early game big problem to solve. The ship that you came on has resources that would be useful on board it. You're trying to find other people who might have survived, and you need to do something about the radiation leak. So your data pad, once it detects the radiation after the ship has a secondary explosion, it's still there, you can still explore it, there's still useful things on board, but it will have a secondary explosion. And at that point your data pad goes, you know what, you might just need a rad suit. Let me give you the blueprints for that. And at this point you've had enough time to get used to the mechanics and get familiar with the shallows. You're now ready to start looking for deeper water and more resources. To make a radiation suit, you need lead. To get lead, you have to go out of the safe shallows and to the grass zone where you've got this lovely red grass that's growing and start looking for more resources over there. Yes, after a certain while, the ship does do an extra spicy boom. And if you are too close, it will cause you problems and can kill you. What I really love about the spicy boom that it does once you get to that point in the story is they really use the graphics and sound to give you the scale and impact of just how big your spaceship is and just how big that explosion is. And it does ripple through the water underneath. I did say that I'd touch on why the ocean is so scary for people with thalassophobia, and I touched on it last week as well. So for those of you who were here last week, I'm sorry for repeating myself. One of the things Subnautica does really, really well is it has attention to detail of things that the average human might not ever notice as being important. If you go and hurl yourself in the ocean today and you know, go for a swim down in a beautiful clear ocean, I recommend the beaches off Barbados, they're gorgeous. Go and swim down and then look back up at the surface. There's no way you're ever going to mistake that you're underwater, not only because you can feel the water on your skin and because you're holding your breath, but because being underwater has a unique look to it. And that's because of how light interacts in air and how light interacts in water. We've all done the experiment when you were a child, when you put a straw in a glass and it looks like it's bent, and that's because of how light refracts through water. One of the things that this causes is a phenomena called Snell's window. Snell's window is what happens when you look up under the water and you'll see what looks like a circle of light above you, where you can see out to the surface above, and then not so much outside of that. And that's to do with how the light is refracting and bouncing back up. And once light starts to penetrate deep enough that refraction isn't returning back up to the surface, that causes Snell's window. And it's something that, as beings with very crucial eyesight as part of our species, that even if you're swimming around and you never pay attention to it, you'll be aware that it's there. Subnautica models this. So when you jump in the water in Subnautica, you are given that immediate feeling of the lighting being correct for being underwater, and that's what makes it feel real, even though it's a video game and even if you're not playing in VR. So if you have thalassophobia, the moment you jump in the water in Subnautica, it's going to trigger it. And I think that's really cool they paid attention to that little detail. It's not something that's discussed. It's not something that is mentioned. It's just natively there, just like it would be in real life. And it's a really nice little touch. Yeah, don't throw yourself in the North Sea looking for Snell's window, Wilf. I don't want to be responsible for hypothermia. So, going into deeper areas to look for more resources to solve your problem. This is what guides you through Subnautica, and it's not only a great way of doing things from a game mechanics perspective and keeping your player engaged and leading them through what you want them to do, but it's a great way to world build. Because as you need these extra resources, you're slowly exposing yourself to more and more and more of the ecology of the world and what makes Subnautica unique. Once you get to the grass zone where you're looking for the ledge, you're going to be exposed to this red seagrass, which is very visually stunning. You're going to start seeing bits of the aurora as a wreck that you can dive down to and look for pieces, and in doing so you're going to see more animals and begin to understand what the food chain of this world looks like. You've got burrowing little sand shark type things that are ambush predators. You encounter your first leviathan as you head out in that direction, and thankfully these are a peaceful leviathan. They're herbivores. They're called reefbacks, and they're effectively like giant whales. They're not whale shaped. They're sort of floating islands just underneath the water with their own ecosystem growing on their back, and they rumble and trumpet constantly. So you can always hear where they are, and you can see them, and you can harvest some of the plants that grow on them. And you're probably going to run into the tiger plant at some point, which is a plant with a defense mechanism. It shoots poisonous spikes at you. So again, you're beginning to understand the ecology more. You've got your normal plants that animals might feed on. You've got your shoals of small fish, including the peeper. But you've also got these predatory elements that have been built in, and you've got a lot more of the peaceful elements than you do of the predatory elements, which makes sense because that's how, energy moves its way up through the food chain. So yes, detail, cell, and environment. People get freaked first time because noise. Yes, the reefbacks have a very bass rumble that the first time you hear it, you go, oh my god, what was that? And then once you realise, oh, they're reefbacks, they're friendly, I've scanned them, and my handy dandy data pad, which is my best friend and reassurance, has told me that they are cuddly and nice, so everything's fine. I'm now reassured by this big sound, which is a problem because the next big sound that you're going to hear is not friendly, but we'll get to that in a minute. Oh, what else have you guys had to say? Yeah, the reefbacks do sound big, and that helps, yes. They're like elephants. They use infrasound. They're very big, they're very loud, they're very stately, and they're very friendly. So you've begun to uncover some more of the ecology of the world, and you're getting used to, at this point in the game, scanning things. And your data pad, if you bother to read it, will tell you extensive detail about each of the things that you scan, whether it's something as simple as a mushroom all the way up to a leviathan like the reefback. There's information about all of them. And this becomes eminently important with something that's introduced very early. One of the first fish that you will see is called a peeper. And they are a little fish with like a giant eyeball. And they're very cute. And you'll see them whizzing about all over the place. And occasionally you'll see one that seems to be almost dragging a sparking trail behind it. And you have no context for why this particular one has that at the minute. It becomes relevant later. So they're building in at the very beginning of the game something that's going to be important at the very end of the game. And that's a really, really good world building and story building element that Subnautica does excellently. So you're finding all these new things, you're unlocking stuff, you've got the rad suit, it's time to go to the Aurora. By now you've probably also made yourself a sea moth, which if I move PupCam again, where shall I put PupCam? Where would it be useful? Let's put it down here for now. PupCam, you go down there. The sea moth is this vehicle you can see in the background. It's a one-person little submersible vehicle that chugs along with a merry little chuffing noise that it makes as it drifts about. You've probably made one of those by now. You head over to the ship, you're going to go in and investigate. You've made yourself some tools so that you can crack open doors, and there's fire extinguishers so you can get past all the bits that are on fire. And now you start finding that video game staple, audio logs and text files. And these are going to tell you things about your crewmates, things that were going on with the mission, and it's little snippets that come from this without it being, diatribes of text. It's very short, that give you sort of a feeling of the greater world that Subnautica belongs to, or the planet that you're on belongs to. You've got things like people betting, codes for doors hidden in logs because somebody's hidden something there, that they're smuggling something they shouldn't have. There's a wonderful data log at one point as you're going through the barracks, where you've got somebody writing a letter to a partner that they want to break up with. They no longer wish to be in a relationship, and it's all in corporate passive-aggressive speak. And then you start finding things out about the company that your ship belongs to, the company that you work for, Altera, and that your data slate comes from, and some of the snarky comments that your data slate has been making in a very deadpan voice. And you start to realize that the mega corporation you work for is corrupt as hell. Human lives mean nothing. You're probably here on some covert mission nobody bothered telling the majority of people about, and you're going to get charged for the for the privilege of being stranded here, because by the time you've picked up X number of resources, you get a note from your data slate telling you how much you owe Altera for making use of the resources on a planet that belongs to them, not you. So you've suddenly now got this idea of the world that you belong to. It's not just science fiction in the future. We're not in Star Trek. This is not an altruistic world where there's plenty for everybody and the problems are larger. This is, we're more in Weyland-Yutani territory here, but we've got a comedic element to it, and thankfully Altera's all the way back over on Earth, and we're busy over here on the planet that we're on. So, you know, you get this sort of world is suddenly opened up to you through these very simple mechanics, and it's also comedic relief for some of the terror that you're going to experience as Subnautica goes on, because make no mistake, Subnautica is a horror game. You can absolutely say spoilers for the end, Eric. I'm going to be dropping spoilers. This game is pretty old. There's a lot in it that I want to talk about and is relevant to what we're going to be doing with Shoal. So, by all means, please do drop spoilers. If there's anybody here who has not played Subnautica and would like to, and doesn't want spoilers, this is probably not the stream for you. So you get to the ship. You're finding all of this stuff, and one of the things you're going to encounter while you're there is you're going to hear the next big noise of the game. And it's a big noise. It's a big roar. It's not a rumble, it's a roar. So there's a 50-50 chance that you'll go, oh, that's a problem. Or that you might go, oh, I wonder what that one is. I want to scan it. And you encounter your first Leviathan, the Reaper Leviathan. Yeah, when you leave the planet, Altera sends you a bill for the items you built and used, which is hilarious. Yes, and I'm going to get to why that line is so important as well as we go on through this. But yeah, you meet the Reaper Leviathan, which is not friendly. And this is your sort of first introduction to the concept of Leviathans rule this world that I've landed on. I am a small fish in an incredibly large pond. And that takes you to your next level of threat. And this is why the stuff that you get off of the Aurora is so important. You're going to learn to make a prawn suit, which is the underwater exosuit that lets you drill for materials. It's much more protective and can last longer than the sea moth. It can also go deeper. Depth becomes one of the challenges that you have to overcome. The deeper you go, the more pressure you're dealing with. And so you need to upgrade your vehicles and equipment to be able to handle that. And this is where one of the few plot holes / world building holes with Subnautica comes in. Some of the depths that you go to, by all rights, the moment that you exit your sea moth, you should be crushed, and you're not. Your character just seems to cope with pressure without ever thinking about it. Your vehicles can't cope with pressure, but you can. And that's the one question that you just have to suspend disbelief over, even though at some point you'll probably think about it. It's just something that just had to be done for the game to work. So we don't think about that question. But it is one of the flaws of the world building of Subnautica is how the hell does Riley survive all of this? He should be flat as a pancake. But, we're going to worry about other things. So you've encountered the Reaper Leviathan. You now know Leviathans can be incredibly deadly. You need to go deeper if you're going to deal with the problems, because the biggest problem that you're now going to run into is, oh, there's a rescue ship on the way. Wonderful. It's going to come and get me. And surprise, surprise, it too gets shot out of orbit. And it's at this point that you realize that your ship was definitively shot down. It wasn't a malfunction, the logs that you've read were correct, the ship was shot out of orbit, and now it's happened to the ship that was going to pick you up and take you home. You can't go home until you solve that problem. So you head over to find out what the hell is shooting ships out of orbit and why. And it's at this point that you find an alien installation, and you learn that the planet's under quarantine because everyone and everything on it is sick, and that includes you. You do a scan of yourself and you find that you've caught the virus that's just passing around this planet, and until you can solve that problem and the alien machine can take a blood sample and confirm that, you know, there's an antidote and that you are now clean, you can't turn the big gun off. If you can't turn the big gun off, there's no point trying to shoot yourself into space to go home because you'll just get blown up. So this is your next level of challenge that you're now trying to overcome, and you're going to need to go deeper to find the other alien installations to get the technology you need to try and find a cure and try and get yourself off the planet. So you start going deeper, you start building up your equipment, you start looking at more problems like power for your vehicles. How are you going to manage that? If you're going to deeper depths, do you want to have to keep coming back up to the surface, and are you going to grow a load of stuff at the surface in grow beds and then carry that down with you? Or is it better to make a base deeper down and then operate out from there? So you're juggling all of these challenges, and this is all built on top of, you know, the very basic one of crash landed, I need food, I need water. We're now at the point where we're worrying about power supply. As you head deeper, you encounter new environments, new leviathans, new lore, new story, and some of the leviathans are fascinating, especially when you find fossilized leviathans, which you can scan, and then gives you the history of this world and its unique ecology. So the leviathans that you've got today are nothing compared to some of the leviathans of old. We've now got history of this place. We've got full world building going on. We've got geological time scales. We've got the concept of volcanism that's come into the game because that's what's powering the alien power plant. It's sat over a volcanic hotspot. You eventually have to go down even closer to this volcanic hotspot to get to the area where the leviathan that you can derive the cure from is being kept. And this is the big point where Shoal and Subnautica will probably cross over, because there is in fact a psionic entity in Subnautica. And that would be the Emperor Leviathan. The Emperor Leviathan is brought into the story in a very fascinating way that I don't think I would ever use for a story on Shoal, for reasons that I'll get into in the next hour, but works really well for a video game. So you've had all of these problems build up on top of each other that you need to go and solve. You're getting the resources to do it. You're unlocking understanding of the world and also the greater scope of the universe that you're living in as you do it. And you're swimming around, and all of a sudden a voice starts talking to you and your vision goes fuzzy. The Emperor Leviathan has telepathy and can talk to certain other species that it finds interesting enough to do so. And what you will find out by the end of the game is that you are interesting and experiencing the concept of emotion and the cycle of life and everything that's important to the Emperor Leviathan in a way that it finds compelling, whereas the aliens that were experimenting on this world and put it into quarantine when the virus got loose, they could never talk to the Emperor Leviathan because, as you find out in the sequel game, they were much more technology focused and cybernetically hive-minded, and it wasn't a mental state that the Emperor Leviathan really gelled with. So the Emperor Leviathan never had the conversations with the aliens that were here and have all since presumably died as it's having with you. And so it starts having these conversations with you and says, look, I know how to help you. I need you to do one thing for me and I can get the antidote to this problem. So you need to get deep enough to find the Emperor Leviathan, and it's being kept at the deepest point in the game in an alien containment facility. So you head on down there, and as you do, you start experiencing and finding all of the alien world building, because you're going into their facilities to find out what they were doing and how, if there's this terrible virus going on, how is this world still currently alive? And you eventually get to a point where you find out that this is where the peepers come back in. They've managed to derive something, not of a cure, but of a sort of preventative that works for some creatures, and they're recycling peepers effectively. The peepers are being drawn down deep into the ocean, where they're picking up this extract and then carrying it back up to the surface, which is just about letting this planet limp on. Its life is continuing, but eventually a tipping point is going to happen, and it's certainly not going to help you. There's no way you can eat enough peepers to solve this problem. What you need is to get the source that this derived thing came from, which turns out to be the Emperor Leviathan. It's going to come from a natural secretion that Emperor Leviathans make, and the reason why the aliens didn't have access to a strong enough version of it is the last remaining Emperor Leviathan they had access to is too old. The enzyme she's producing just isn't strong enough. You're gonna need it from new Emperor Leviathans. And that's what the aliens were focused on, was trying to birth Emperor Leviathan eggs, and they just couldn't do it. The reason they couldn't do it is because they didn't know what the eggs needed. But the mama Emperor Leviathan is willing to tell you, because she wants her babies to be born and for this planet to go on, and she couldn't or wouldn't communicate with the aliens, but she will communicate with you. So she tells you what you need to do, you get the stuff together, and you hatch the eggs. And at this point, you are now cured of the disease that you've got, because they immediately start making the enzyme that you need. So you've now solved one of the big problems, but you've still got other problems that you need to contend with. And you've had this wonderful interaction with this alien being that can talk to you, that can give you her perspective on the world, and your place in it, both in her world and, of course, her place in your world as you're experiencing this. She's a very gentle soul, very innocent by human standards. She's interested in play and having her children born and the freedom of the waves. She's a very sort of innocent thing compared to the things that we worry about perhaps in our normal lives. She doesn't know anything about old terror and the fact that money is a resource and all of this nonsense. Her concerns are much more basic, but no less pure for that, and no less important. So you've had this wonderful experience with her, the babies have been born, and unfortunately, with the babies being born, you can tell that she's going to die. Her life's purpose is over, and like many aquatic species, in particular the octopus, the mother stays with the babies and nurtures them to the point where they can be independent, and she's so dedicated to doing so that the mama octopus will die as the babies are born and leave the nest. And this is what you're seeing with the Emperor Leviathan. She tried communicating with the aliens, but they weren't able to listen. Yeah, I think that's how it goes. Yeah, it's been a little while since I last played it. So you've had this wonderful experience. You've got the babies. You've healed. You can now turn off the big gun. Wonderful. Downside, there's no ship coming to get you for a very long time. You've got to get yourself off this planet. Upside, while you were exploring the Aurora, you found the ability to make a shuttle, a launch craft that can get you off the planet and send you back home, or at least close enough to a relay to get picked up to be sent home. So you can now build this thing yourself, so long as you can find all the components that you need to put it together. So you continue harvesting from the planet that you're on, you build yourself a rocket, you've turned off the big gun, and you're going to get to the point where it's time to go home. One of the things that you may have found by this point is Subnautica has this wonderful little ancient fish species called the cuttlefish. The cuttlefish is adorable. You know what? I'm going to go and hang on, give me just a minute. You guys need to see the cuttlefish. I'm going to go and find a picture of a cuttlefish and see if I can throw it into OBS. No, I don't want cuttlefish. I want cuddlefish. Let's see. Let's save this onto the desktop. Boop. And then OBS. Give me a image. Browse desktop. There we go. There is the cuttlefish. He is very adorable. He loves you. He's precious, and there's like 5 of them in the whole game. And they're extinct, but you bring them back by hatching them, and they're somewhat intelligent in the same way that a pet dog would be. And they will play with you, and you can give them treats, and you can cuddle them, and other than your data slate, they are your only friends on this planet because everybody else is dead. They either got eaten by Reaper Leviathans, or they sank to the bottom, or even more terrible things happened to them. And you reach the point where you've built your shuttle and it's time to go. And the game lets you go and say goodbye to your cuddlefish. And if you do not tear up a little bit when you go and say goodbye to your cuddlefish, you are a monster and not human. You are also a monster if you try to take them with you by sticking them into a locker on a ship in stasis, because that's just cruel and mean, and how could you? So you say goodbye to your cuddlefish. You get on board the shuttle to take yourself home. One of the really neat things from a game development perspective that the game then does is it gives you the ability to make a time capsule to leave behind as you leave. And you have to leave a time capsule behind. And in it you can put a small amount of items, as well as a screenshot photograph from the game of your choosing, and a message. And those time capsules can be found by other people playing Subnautica if they happen to run into one in the game. This led to the wonderful green text story of somebody who found a time capsule with a pair of hoverfish inside it. And they were like, oh great, I'm hungry, I can cook those and eat them. Then they read the message from the other player who was like, these were my hoverfish that I kept, they're my friends, they've got names, I can't remember what the names were, please look after them for me and good luck on your adventure. Do not eat things you find in the time capsule till you read the message, please folks, if you play this game. So you say goodbye to the cuddlefish, you get on board the shuttle, you make your time capsule, it's time to leave. As you are leaving, you get one final telepathic message from the Emperor, where she says that as she falls among the sands, you go off to be among the stars, but for all she's dying and you're off to what comes next, just like with the waves, you go together. And that's the human story that's built into Subnautica, and that comes from being on this alien world with all these challenges that you've overcome, is the things that you've engaged with have affected you as a person. And anyone, and I mean it's just true to life, anyone that you engage with who leaves an impression on you, that's something that you carry with you for the rest of your days and potentially makes its way into works that you will go on to make. Friendship is magic and also heresy. So Subnautica uses a very simple concept, you are stranded on an alien world, make your way home, to tell a very human story. And I think there's a lot to be said for that. And the fact that it does stick to these simple principles, but then gives you the option to find these tiny details that will flesh things out, as well as these overarching environmental details that give you the whole story, that then carries you off home. So you've had this very emotional message from the Emperor Leviathan, you know, that she's dying, but that's not the important thing. The important thing is that you had the meeting that you had and that you will go on. And again, if you don't tear up listening to it, you are not human and a monster. And then the game goes, well, yes, but there's also the meta-human story of we want you, the audience member, to be having a good time. So Altera chimes in as the last message you hear, where they inform you that you are in orbit, ready to return, you know, coming back to Earth, but you're not allowed to land until you clear your balance for all of the items you used along your journey, which is some ludicrous amount of dollars. And it's very funny, and you then walk away from the game with a very positive feeling, and you then get to listen to the credits music, which is great. Subnautica is genius, and has definitely contributed to some of the ideas I've been throwing around for Shoal, and possibly for some of the rest of you as well. That were here. So if you want to have ideas for Shoal, you're not sure where to go, play Subnautica for a bit. It's a great game. I highly recommend it, and it is one of those games out there that I do think has a phenomenal sense of world building. Absolutely brilliant sense of world building, and is something that storytellers of all kinds can learn from, no matter what it is that what medium you choose to work in. Tired German says they've posted their sketches on the channel. Wonderful. I should repost that channel because the pin has gone away. Let me come over here and do that. Should be... Nope, do not have. Let's go and grab the link again then. Yes, there is much nerdery going on in here. Many, many nerderies. Give me link. Give me chat. Boop, there we go. This is where you can do Shoal things. And Twitch is going to have a moment at me. There we go. That should stay up till the end of stream this time now. So that was my ramble and rant about Subnautica. As I say, I highly recommend it. It's very relevant to things that we're doing with Shoal, and I just think it's a great game, a great piece of world building, and a great story. So we'll make that go away now. We will put PupCam back where it belongs. That's not PupCam, you're moving, OBS. That's still not PupCam. Let me move PupCam, thank you. That goes up there. There we go. I think the babies are still sleeping. We'll see about waking them up before we're done today. And that's going to lead us into Shoal. I'm going to give myself just a moment so that I can have some drink after all that wittering. And I do appreciate you guys hanging around for it. And then we'll go on to looking at everything that's happened over the last week with Shoal and then some new ideas. Are you making a shoal fish section? Yes, we started on that last week, Mo, with some of the animals, and I'd like to look at that some more today. So I've popped up on screen what the goals are that I'd like to achieve today, just over here. I'd love to have a look at the stuff that I've reviewed over the last week to do with Shoal's physics. I already talked briefly about Ninja Simulation, but I will talk about it again because I see more people have joined us. And then I want to go over what we brainstormed last week to start balancing our ecosystems, which might lead us into needing to talk about how psionics for Shoal will work for a brief time. And I think we need to spend at least part of today talking about some leviathans, because we did decide we wanted some large sea life. And all of that will end up going into the bestiary, and we've also got a herbiary for all the plants that will eventually be the final thing. And we can add to that for as long as we feel we need to. Will we eventually be able to self-publish this story and print on demand for the BPL Orcs? Potentially, 7Blue7. I don't have an issue with that. This is the sort of thing we're making communally. If we get it to a point where it's in a state where we want to do that, I'd love to be able to. We have some wonderful artists in the Legion and also in the Orcs. And I think getting an illustrated compendium together that looks like sort of a D&D type supplement would be a really cool thing to do. Or to bring it back to a stream I did previously, if we could make something that's similar to Dark Matter, the setting that Doctor Who is currently building a story in. Because Dark Matter is fantastic. I really enjoyed looking at that a couple of streams ago with Doctor Who, and I'm really hoping we can revisit Dark Matter again at some point. If we can get something that's made to that level of quality and detail and make that available, I think that would be really cool. Oh, right there. Hydrate. Okay. So, let me click on... Yeah, let's bring this side over to show that, and this side over to show this. There we go. So a lot of the things that we'd already figured out in previous sessions where we decided we were orbiting a gas giant, we decided how many moons the gas giant had, we decided how many planets were in the solar system, the name of the star, the names of the other planets. We decided that we were going to have oceans, but we would have some land masses. We decided that one of the moons would be in perfect opposing orbit, so it's always hidden behind the gas giant. And that would be the hidden moon. That could be an element of storytelling that would be really interesting. Whilst I was talking to Ninja Turtle about that, with the simulation that he put together, which is really cool, and I will go into again in a minute for those who missed it. The way light lenses around the gas giant would mean that on perfect days, if things were just right, the people of Shoal have probably always known that there's something out there on the other side of the gas giant, because with the light lensing around the planet, there would be almost a reflection that you'd be able to see, but only extremely faintly and on perfect days. So the concept of a haunted moon or a hidden moon as a cultural element, as this sort of conspiracy or element of how the cultures have developed, is absolutely something we can play with, and I think that's going to be really, really interesting. Are there mechs like Gundams sort of things but not Gundams? Yes. We haven't gotten far enough yet. Is it Mikade? I apologize if I pronounce names wrong. I'm terrible at names. We haven't gotten far enough to developing them yet, but we know they're going to be a thing. We know that we want to have everything from agricultural mechs to transport mechs, potentially colony-sized mechs. We know that we want to have mechs that will be known as the Titans, which have their own personalities that have been derived from working with their pilots for as long as they are. We know that the mechs are going to use Shoal's unique resource, which is coral, which is psionic. Coral spelt with an H, because we're using a lot of sound theming for this setting. So we know we've got a lot of plans, but what we're doing is we are world building from the very, very ground up, so that our whole setting makes sense and or at least makes sense to it within a degree of, plausibility. We're not going down to hard numbers. We're not doing hard sci-fi, but we do want to make it so that suspension of disbelief is really easy, and so that everybody who chooses to work with this setting is all coming at it from a unified perspective. So we're going to make a PDF file that will let people sort of see what's going on, which will eventually become an illustrated manual. That's my long-term goal for it. But to get there, we have to do all the world building first. And that's what I'm doing in this second hour each week with you guys in chat, because communal writing is my favorite kind of writing. I really love having other people's perspectives. So where had I gotten to? So one of the things that we'd sort of sorted out was we were going to have all of these different things. We'd sorted out the year. We'd figured that we were going to have the gas giant takes 5 years to orbit the star, and that would be called a grand year, and that the moon Shoal, which is the setting that we're actually using, takes one standard Earth year to orbit its gas giant, which we would refer to as a close year. So we then have 5 close years to 1 grand year. And a grand year will, of course, carry Shoal a whole loop around the star, just the same as its gas giant. So we'd figured that out, and that was relatively simple. That didn't take us too much to figure that out. But what then got really complicated was we started thinking about, well, what's the concept of a day? What's the concept of a month? How does that work when we know that we're going to have these prolonged light periods and dark periods, because the night sky from Shoal is going to be so alien to what we know from Earth? You've got all these other moons in orbit. You've got the gas giant in orbit. Or you're orbiting it. You've got the star itself. There's going to be times where the gas giant is between Shoal and the star, and other times where Shoal is between the star and the gas giant. But because the gas giant is a big white luminous gas giant, some of that light's going to be reflected back. So you're going to have periods where the entire planet has light. And it all got very confusing and complicated, and my brain started dribbling out my ears, and we moved on to some other things until we could get our brains around that. And that was when Ninja Turtle stepped in and did amazing nerdy things for us that I'm hoping I'll be able to show you in the near future. What he did was he went and took Universe Sandbox and he modeled Shoal's system. He started with Earth's solar system and then started tweaking things and did a whole lot of very nerdy but very cool things. And he managed to get everything orbiting up to a certain point. There's some more things he wants to do and fix and tweak. But he did manage to get all the different planets into place up to the gas giant Luastra. He managed to get Shoal orbiting it, and he managed to get most of the other moons orbiting and it all working together. The star is a brighter star to extend where the Goldilocks zone expands out to, for Luastra to orbit through so that Shoal can be a habitable moon. He gave a little bit of an eccentricity to Shoal's orbit, so it has a sort of slight up-down, a wave to its orbit. That allows it to stay close enough to the heat of the star that the oceans never fully freeze over. It always has liquid oceans so that we can have that environment that we wanted to have. He made it, I think it's slightly bigger than Earth, if I remember correctly, and it needed to be the size that it is to stop it from being drawn either out of orbit to crash into Luastra or to spin off into space under its own momentum. So he got that working. He got all of these other moons moving, and then he let me sit and watch it with the whole thing orbiting for multiple years, just watching it all go round, and it was beautiful. You've got all these different moons in motion, and it's like watching spinning ballet dancers all moving around the gas giant. And all of a sudden I could perceive how things worked and what things would look like. And I think I've solved some of the problems we came up with. Yes, Ed Gauss is mentioning some of the stuff that I've said on the Discord, which once I'm done with stream, I'll be paying attention to the Discord throughout the rest of the week. If you guys want to drop me messages, drop me ideas, drop me things that should be tweaked. And I do think it will make sense for surface, you know, creatures that would benefit from eyesight as on Earth would probably benefit from eyesight on Shoal. So I do think we will have some species that have eyesight, but I also think that for deeper sea species, it would make sense for them not to have eyesight, because it's just not going to make sense. Ecologically, that would be the right way to do it, I feel. I can see Mo and Seven are bringing up some good points about the ghost moon. I think for simplicity's sake, we're just going to have it be a sister moon. It's phase locked. It will Ninja Turtle will tell us definitively whether it's the exact same size or not, but we were talking about it, and it's probably going to be a very cold desert moon about the same size. It probably will not be a habitable moon. And I will get Ninja Turtle to talk about that when he does the recording for me of the stuff that he's done, if he's still happy to do that. If he doesn't want to talk over it, that's fine. I am still, however, going to get down on my knees and beg for a recording of the visuals, because it was really cool. It was really, really cool. So, solving the year problem. I'm just going to read a little bit of what I wrote, because that's the easiest way to do it. We figured out grand years and close years, problem solved. A day is also somewhat complex on an ocean moon. In terms of a single axial rotation, a day on Shoal is 48 hours of Earth time. This does not, however, match a light-dark cycle as on Earth. Shoal often experiences long periods of dark when the star Mern is hidden behind the bulk of Luastra due to its complex orbit. It also experiences periods of heightened light as Mern's light reflects off of Luastra's white atmosphere. The result is that while scientists know that an axial rotation exists and its length, the concept of a day is meaningless to ordinary people, as it's not an easily perceivable notion of time. Instead, the people and creatures of Shoal operate on a standard unit unique to the ocean world. And this was where my writer head came out and went, well, this is what you do as a fantasy writer, is you look at the problem that you've got and you go, okay, I've built this entire world with this unique thing. Is there a way that makes sense for the unique thing to solve the problem that's been caused by this setting not being the same as Earth? And if so, it's probably best to use the unique thing to do that. Because then you're tightening up your theming, you're not bringing in extraneous things that people have to keep track of. It's all very self-contained, very thematic, very tight, and that makes it more easy to understand. So my brain went, solve this problem with coral. Coral, the psionic growth Shoal is known for, which seems to harmonise with the movement of its celestial family, emits a background hum felt throughout both Shoal's oceans and its atmosphere. It ebbs and wanes in tune with the axial rotation of Shoal, and thus the people measure time in songs. One song rises and ebbs throughout the course of one day. From this, the concept of hours and minutes can also be derived. That's how I solved the day problem. How do you guys feel about that? Grimos is on board. How do the rest of us feel? Ed Gauss, when we get to that, I'd love to talk about concepts of echolocation. I think echolocation is going to be a really good thing to build in. Quinlist likes it. Rowboat Girly Man, I hope your blue armor is doing well. Haven't decided that part yet. I think we'll break that down when we actually start putting the calendar together, because right now that hasn't become important. But it doesn't have to be a 24-hour day. What we do... Let me back up. We know it will be a 48-hour day because one song matches with an axial rotation, but that doesn't mean we have to break down the hours the same on Shoal as we do on Earth. It might be easier to do that and have it be, oh yes, there's 48 hours in a day because we have a concept of a day as being that, and that makes it easy for writers to visualize. Or perhaps we say that, oh, well, it has 24 hours in a day, that each hour just happens to be doubly as long as on Earth. Or we can do something completely unique. I don't want coral to be everything in this setting either, but I do feel like it's going to be a foundational background thing. And this seemed like a really easy way to solve it. If you've got another way of solving the concept of a day problem, I am definitely open to hearing it. Timekeeping coral sounds like a good way of doing things. I don't think the coral itself would be a good measure for precise time, but it would be a good measure for, the length of a day. And then you do exactly like we do on Earth for real, is we don't decide the length of a day based on how long the light is, because that changes over the year depending on where you are in the seasonal rotation. We just broke down everything into hours and minutes that were more standardized. So the coral defines what a day is, but it doesn't necessarily have to define precise minutes and hours. Songs would also help with explaining how the people on this planet thought about using coral for their tech. Yeah, I think as we build the coral up and figure it out, that will very much all build into the culture and the technology level here. Okay, so we're going to go with that then. We've solved the day problem. So with that, I then extrapolated out further with the problem we were having with the concept of seasons. So I shall read to you what I wrote on that, and we'll see what you think about this. The seasons. Just as a year is a complex concept for Shoal, as well as months and even days, the seasons too are an abstraction from the Earth standard. While on other worlds seasons are defined by axial rotation around a central star and experienced due to changes in light exposure and climate conditions from this, Shoal has other concerns. Stellar light is often in flux due to Shoal's complex orbit, but radiation from the host planet instead comes into place to affect the climate of Shoal, especially during extended and regular meteor showers. Thus, Shoal does not have a standard concept of summer heat or winter chill. Temperature can change for other reasons, and the seasons it does experience are affected not just by stellar light, but also regular eclipses and an orbit speed determined by its host planet. The result is that Shoal does not measure its seasons based on its own axial rotation, but instead by progress throughout a close year around Luastra. And this is where Ninja Turtle's awesome model really helped, because as we were watching it, and he was explaining it to me, as Shoal moves around Luastra, and Luastra moves around Mern, there are periods where Luastra is effectively ahead of Shoal on its orbit, with Shoal lagging behind it, which means the gravitational pull of Luastra is going to be pulling Shoal on so that it's going faster. And then once Shoal passes in front of Luastra, and now the gas giant is lagging behind, it's going to slow Shoal down. This means that the stars in the night sky go at different speeds and potentially in different directions depending on what point in orbit we're at. Which almost made my brain dribble out my ears, except I could see it in motion and it made perfect sense. And I think that's going to affect how we do seasons. So I think that what Shoal should have are seasonal bands, basically 3 types of season. And I'll read out the ones that I've set for you. And you guys can let me know what you think. Seasonal bands. There are 2 seasonal bands which affect all of Shoal at the same time, and it's caused by the gravitational pull of Luastra. As Shoal circles its gas giants, there are times it's behind the planet and thus pulled through space faster. Conversely, at the other end of the close year, it is ahead of Luastra and thus slowed by the gravity of its lagging giant companion. These bands are evident to the people of Shoal by how fast the stars are moving across the heavens and in which direction, as sometimes the stars will appear to move in reverse. As a result, the large seasonal bands are split into the following. Presto seasonal band, when Shoal is lagging behind Luastra and pulled faster through its orbit by the immense gravity of its host. Stars in the sky appear to be moving faster. Largo seasonal band, when Shoal is racing ahead of Luastra and has its orbit slowed by its gravitational pull. The sky seems to move slower as a result. And what I've done there is I have pulled in those song and musical terminologies again to continue tightening up that concept of sound and the fact that when you see the model, it really does look like the moons are dancing around Luastra. So I've tried to keep the theming very tight there. Shoal Sextant would look like the observatory from Dark Crystal. Absolutely. And building in locations like that would be really fun. If Shoal is mostly water and Ghost is a cold mineral desert, then it'd be bigger in size, so its surface would rotate faster than Ghost. The same actual rotation as Shoal. The difference in size would account for Ghost's ability to hide beside or behind the gas giant. Those are some really interesting thoughts, Mo. Admittedly, I'm leaving that level of high science thinking to Ninja Turtle because he's much better at it than me. But yeah, absolutely. Just a thought, how will being in orbit around a gas giant affect tides? A lot. If we had just Shoal orbiting around Luastra, the tides would be ridiculous. If you look at moons orbiting around Jupiter, they get rock tides because the gravitational pull is so heavy. One of the things that we're using to counterbalance this, so that we get strong tides but not too strong, is the other moons that are in orbit. And when Ninja Turtle did some measurement, the tides are about twice as powerful as on Earth, which is, you know, some significant tides, but not to the point where it would be unlivable for creatures adapted to it. It might not have been quite twice as heavy, I can't remember. But he did balance the tides so that they weren't too extreme, but they would be extreme compared to what we're familiar with. Alright, so that's our first set of seasons. We've got the two seasonal bands, effectively fast season and slow season. I then moved into light seasons. As with other planets, light does play a role for Shoal, whether it is direct light from the star Mern or reflected indirect light bounced off of Luastra as Shoal moves into eclipse. These light-based seasons can happen within both of the above bands. And I have named these three seasons that we'll have: Lambent season, when direct light from Mern is felt and reflected off of Luastra, lighting up much of Shoal, and that will occur once per close year. Gloam season, when only indirect light off of Luastra is felt as Shoal passes towards or out of eclipse, and that will happen twice per close year, meaning that gloam season may be in wax or wane. A waning gloam follows a lambent season, while a waxing gloam follows a tenebrous season. And the tenebrous season will be when no light from Mern is felt, as Shoal is in full eclipse behind Luastra, and that occurs once per close year. So the gloam seasons will be as Shoal is moving behind the gas giant and then emerging, because light will curve around Luastra for a while. It's not going to be direct light anymore, but it is still light that's coming around because light bends. We know light bends. Let's see, what have you guys got? Like, suppressed band would be great elements for the people to create ghost stories around. Absolutely. So we've got our first two sets. We've got seasonal bands. We've got what light season we're in. And then I figured that there would be a tertiary season that would be tracked by the people of the planet, which I've called Skyfall. Now, originally we were talking about maybe naming a landmass Skyfall. But once I read this, I think you guys will understand why I thought it might be better for a season name. Radiation has a large effect on Shoal, with many life forms adapted to utilise and survive such rays. Shoal's orbit periodically takes it out into the rings of Lua, the debris rings around the gas giant, which also house much of the radiation held in place by Luastra's immense gravity. This causes a tertiary season that can overlap with the above, characterised by meteor falls, radiation spikes, which often result in floral blooms in the oceans, and a distinct effect on agriculture. To the locals, this seasonal effect is known as Skyfall and overlays other areas of the seasonal calendar as appropriate. So this will be meteor season. Yeah, we could have a season and a continent named the same. The only reason I'm wary to do that is because the intention is to use this setting to tell stories. The less confusion you put in place, the better. You want to be clear and crisp so that it's really easy for an unfamiliar audience to follow what you're saying. Otherwise, you end up with Final Fantasy 13 syndrome, where you had all of these names thrown at you, and if they're too similar or if they're too foreign to the natural way people speak, it just becomes meaningless gobbledygook in your head until way too late, and you've quite potentially lost your audience before you get to the point where they can keep up with what you're trying to explain to them. So if we can avoid having two things called Skyfall, that would be great. If it ends up making complete sense for that to be the case and we can use it appropriately in our writing, then that's also fine. So once I'd figured all of that out and it all made sense in my head, I thought, well, it's not going to make sense to anybody else unless I can show how it would work in practice. So I then thought about how would this sort of 3-season circus work. So, all of this to say, seasons are discussed as a mixture of elements by the people of Shoal as it affects their world and circumstances. Many are the children of Shoal who look forward to a presto waning gloam when the stars race across the sky and traditional scary stories are told around sumptuous feasts. So much the better if Skyfall coincides and meteors light up the oncoming long dark as a sign of fortune ahead. How do you guys feel about all of that? And I'm going to have another sip of drink while I wait to see what you guys have to say. Ceres is also asking to go into the puppy palace. Okay, Gauss is saying yes. Tired German likes it. Grimos feels good about it. Go on, go get those little beans before they escape. Thank you. Yes, they swarm. Let's bring PupCam up big for a minute and see what they're up to. Where is PupCam? There it is. Make it big, OBS. There we go. Let's have some big PupCam for a minute. Well, it's not very bright in there. Give me just a moment, chat. I'm going to stand up and go and turn a light on so we can see the babies better. There we go, I come back. So poor Ceres is now at the point where the babies still want milk, even though they're getting solid food. And she doesn't have much milk left. And they're really big. When all three of them try to feed at once, she cannot use her hind legs anymore. The poor girl. She is being swarmed by little land piranha. She's doing a bit. She doesn't even have one of her back legs on the floor right now. You are very welcome, 7Blue7. Sharing our baby girl and her adventures has been one of our great joys. And her reproducing with Pip and having babies has just been a wonderful experience. And I'm so glad we get to share it with people. Because they are precious little babies and just little lights in the world. Especially when, you know, times can feel a bit hard. Let's see, what else have we got going on in chat? How big a role will astrologers play on Shoal given the complexity of the system? Also, what would horoscopes be like? I have a feeling that horoscopes probably wouldn't work the same way as they have on Earth, and that will be something to talk about when we get to culture. Astrologers, though, I feel like they would be really quite important figures, because to figure out how space works, growing up and developing and evolving on a world like Shoal, that's going to require some really complex understanding of physics in space and just what's going on up there. So I think by the point where astrologers could understand what was going on in the sky. I feel like we would have had a large period of, perhaps soothsayers and star readers that put value into the skies, but without any scientific knowledge behind it. And then once the scientific knowledge started coming along, you're going to have a period where it was disbelieved an awful lot, because initially they're going to have gotten so much wrong, because it's such a complex system. But then once they do figure it out, you're going to have to be a really intelligent person to be able to keep all those concepts in your head. So I feel like astrologers would be very highly regarded, but that's something that we'll discuss when we get to culture. For having all of this in a story, you could just do some footnotes when the season-specific words come up. That could be a really good idea. So one of my favourite series, and that actually had more of an inspiration on where my thought process have gone with Shoal than Subnautica did. I mean, there's obvious parallels with Subnautica, but it's not something that I've deliberately drawn inspiration from. Something I have deliberately drawn inspiration from is the Dragon Riders of Pern books, which I talked about a couple of streams ago, and I'll probably do a full ramble about those at some point. But the Dragon Riders of Pern books, because, again, you're talking about a setting that's very clever, excellent world building, explored at a reasonable pace, but it's got so much going on that becomes relevant because everything is interwoven, that by the time you start getting to later books, they come with helpful glossaries in them of what certain words mean or refer to, and I never found that off-putting reading those books. Because things like, the word harper is really important. The equivalent on Earth would be they're bards. But they're really important to the culture of the people of Pern, and they don't use the word bard, they use the word harper. So, that's in a glossary, it's defined. The nests that the dragon riders keep their dragons in have their own unique name, and all of these other things that you needed to know. And then once it got into some of the political shenanigans, you needed to be able to remember, what hold was where and what was going on. So you eventually ended up at the point where maps could be useful, and you at least had a description of, what colony or hold was what. So we could absolutely do that. I don't think that's a bad thing to do in writing if you use it responsibly and reasonably, and you try not to have to over rely on that, but you have it there as an appropriate tool. And it's the sort of thing that I'd love to see come back, because writing's kind of gone through this it's gone through this horrible blandinization where certain things have become not acceptable, and the concept of a story has been refined down and refined down and refined down to a formula or a series of formulas that if you do A then B then C you'll get D, and most stories follow that. And there are certain extraneous things that have been cut away, particularly by the influence of publishing houses, as we've gone through this critical time of going from all print media to now most media is digital, and the publishing houses really haven't coped well with that period, and it has made them risk adverse isn't quite the right way of putting it, but the writing world, one of the big things that you'll see as a writing tip is that you need to have a hook with the first line that's going to grab the reader and keep them there, which, yes, that is good advice, but it's gotten to the point now where publishing houses focus on these things so hard that other ways of doing things aren't explored by writers as much as they were before. And things like the prologue have gone by the wayside as a result. Sarah, you're going to have to wait, baby girl. Prologues are one of the things that I was really pleased to see them go and really sad to see them go, and I'm desperate to see them come back. Because what happened with prologues is people started using them incorrectly. And publishing houses became very averse to them as the move from physical media to digital media came in, because we don't want to waste time with a prologue, get them straight into the story, we can't risk losing the reader, we need them to bye. And this resulted in the classic example is the first Harry Potter book. Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, or whatever else you might know it as depending on what country you picked it up in. opens with a scene where Dumbledore and Professor McGonagall are delivering baby Harry to live with the Dursleys after Voldemort has killed his parents. That's where the story begins. You see them leaving the baby and all of their worries about, well, is it right leaving him with a Muggle family? Sort of foreshadowing some of the trials and tribulations that are going to come from that. And this is referred to as Chapter 1, which is incorrect. J.K. Rowling called it Chapter 1 because at the time where she was looking to get published, prologues were a no-no. You do not open with a prologue. It will, get your manuscript overlooked very quickly. But it is a prologue. It is a moment in time in the story that's being told from the perspective of a different character to the rest of the book. It's set in a different time period to the entire rest of the book, and with a different perspective on a set of concerns that will not be relevant for the rest of the book, for the most part. You're not following Harry, you're not following his struggle with coming to terms with being a wizard and how that interferes with his, normal human life and his abusive family relationship, and then, of course, the resurgence of Voldemort and everything that goes on in the first book. Chapter 1 of Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone has nothing to do with any of that. It's purely about how Harry ended up in the house that he ended up in. It's a prologue. It's just not called one. And I can see Eric has mentioned another thing to do with prologues. Don't call the prologue Chapter 0. Yes, we will talk about that book maybe next stream if I'm left to my own devices again. We will talk about the book that has Chapter 0 for a prologue and why that's wrong, because I don't want to lose the time that we've got here today. So, there's a lot of things that have gone by the wayside with writing. That I do want to see some of these things come back. That includes prologues. It includes having glossaries and maps for books that deserve to have glossaries and maps. And the Shoal setting might end up being one of those, and that will be fine. And the puppies are now having a riotous good time. I'm going to make them just a little bit smaller so I can see my notes. I'll keep them bigger than normal. And we'll carry on with what we're doing today. So I think we've decided that we're good with how the year setup now works, with how we're going to measure seasons. And this is what I was saying earlier when I said that we're probably going to set up a calendar that's easy to follow, that's narratively based rather than scientifically based. I don't want to break the year down into, well, this year conveniently has this many months with this many days per month, and we have leap years every this number. I don't think that's appropriate for this setting. That's something that I did for my personal setting, Hefner, and made me have to semi-break Aeon Timeline 2, my calendar software, because it couldn't handle how I do leap years in that setting. But for this setting, I think it will make more sense to set the calendar in terms of seasons and make it more narrative, that we sort of have the seasons govern the year. And we maybe decide that there are X number of songs per season, and then maybe we break those into the concept of months or something. We'll look at that when we get specifically to doing the calendar. And calendars are a sentient creature construct. Yes, obviously the progression of time affects all life on a planet. That's normal and natural, but and you'll have sort of spawning seasons or the rut, etc., and all of these things that happen. But actually codifying a calendar is a result of sentient society. So I'd rather tackle it when we get to that point, because I think it's going to be important to bear in mind cultural elements and how they play into that as well. What have we got going on in chat? Narrative calendars are way easier. Yep. Time since milestone. Yep. Every time I hear prologue, I think of the narrative PTSD. These have a 40k Inquisitor Draco. Yeah, fair. There's a lot of bad prologues out there, which is why people got away from them, was they were being misused. And next week, if I talk about the book Eric brought up, we will very much be talking about structures that got misused. So that will be fun. All right, I'm going to need to take a second. Ceres is desperate to go out and pee. I will make PupCam very, very big, and I will be back in just a couple of moments. There we go. Let's make PupCam big. And you can watch Freya playing with her toys. Please bear with me. I will be back in just a minute. And I'm back. Sorry about that. Oh, we've got puppy wrestling going on. Puppy Fight Club. Where's Hauser when you need him? We need an announcer. Idea time delineations are called verses, stanzas and beats instead of hours, minutes and seconds. I might not go too deep into that theming because it might get a bit overbearing, but it's certainly something to consider and what we do want to use for that. And again, that will become important once we get to culture and what words we think would be appropriate. I do like how the idea of time and music are closely intertwined. Okay, then yeah, we will push that a bit when we get to there. Okay, right. Let's take a look at some of the other things we were going to try and get done today. Pip, you are not making it easy for me to put PupCam back to a reasonable size. Yeah, keep PupCam a bit bigger. There we go. Got to see Puppy Fight Club. So, that was all of the expansion of the fundamental physics of Shoal. Ninja did an amazing animation that helped me to make all of that make sense. I really can't wait for you guys to see that as and when it's ready. It's extremely cool. Next thing that I wanted to do was to sort of go over balancing the ecosystem, because we did a whole load last week of very, very high level ideas for what sort of life we wanted to have where. And I think we need to sort of balance the ecosystem, because too many predators, not enough prey will not work. Where would we like to start? Because I have a feeling that we're only going to have time to do one area today. So do we want to look at some of the ocean species? Do we want to look at some of the land species? Do we want to look at the freshwater species? Where would we like to sort of really balance ourselves first? What do you guys feel like? Yeah, we are going to need to put some prey species together. Bestiary, here we go. Can we refer to the times of year as tides and their temps like winter is polar tide? That's a really good idea. I am going to stick that into chat notes because that is a very, very good idea. That makes a lot of sense. So, this came from Shackle. I can't spell today. I am the best writer. Can we refer to the times of year as tides and their temps like winter is polar tide? That's a great thought. I now have that listed. So we want to look at some prey species. So okay, let's go to let's take ourselves to shallow ocean, and we will start looking at some shallow ocean species. I'm going to grab my notes from last week. Okay, and then I'm going to make PupCam a bit smaller so you guys can see my notes as well. I think that would be a sensible way of doing this. There we go. So we said last week that the shallow ocean benefits from sunlight and the heating and cooling cycle that comes from that, especially if there are good ocean currents to circulate nutrients and enrich deeper water that comes to the surface. There's no reason why that shouldn't be the case on Shoal. We decided that we've only got a few land masses. There's no reason why you couldn't have a good circulation of water around the planet. There's plenty of access for that to happen. This means shallow oceans can be very rich in a huge array of life, whether it be plant or animal. Life in this zone has a wealth of resources to take advantage of, but tidal forces will be our detriment. Shoal's gravity is going to be about the same as Earth, as I understand it. Yep, radiation blooms, mushroom fields, moss and lichen. We've got crabs on the list of for just about every environment, Ed. There are crabs everywhere. You guys are obsessed. Alright, so shallow ocean life, I think our base of the food chain is going to have to be some form of plankton and krill. I can't think of a good reason why those wouldn't be here. Crabs are handled. Yes, we do like crabs. Nano crabs in the bloodstream. I am not getting into nano crabs. Thank you, Grimo. It's a very helpful quote. If it isn't crabs, it's puppies or cats. Yes. Yes, I did hear that Squick was very upset that there were no pups on Numeric Workshop last night. Unfortunately, I was not able to stay up and watch. Okay, so we've got plankton and krill as our sort of foundational species. I feel like because we're going to be having coral be such a crucial part of our ecosystem in general, if the plankton's feeding on the coral, which is psionically active, perhaps the plankton is how that gets through the food chain, at least in part. It was a dog for the voice script. Wonderful. Oh my goodness. That is a lot of quotes that we've had on this channel. Coral would be initially growing among mundane coral. Yes, we absolutely should have mundane coral and other plants built in among it. It shouldn't be just coral. Plankton is the grits of the ocean. Okay, so plankton, we're thinking probably carries psionic energy from the coral it feeds on, which then will move into the krill. We're also going to have algae, which will go into the herbiary rather than into the bestiary. So what do we want to have feed on shoals, plankton and krill? I know we're going to have crabs. We are definitely going to have crabs. Yeah, we need to have some sponges as well. So there's a whole series of fish we could draw from real life to help build this up. I think I think our ocean would benefit from being very similar to Earth in terms of its makeup. Lots of schooling fish that operate as prey species for larger predatory fish. We were going to have bobbit worms, but those are in the deep ocean. Big floaty filter feeders. Now, we said that one of the transitional life forms that we wanted was going to be jellyfish that were happy to also float in the air because their digestive system would generate enough sort of heat and gas that they could float. But I think having some jellyfish that are just jellyfish would be a good idea. Yes, there was a puppy squeak. Do you remember the other day I gave the other day? Remind me, Ed, I've probably got it written down or access to it, but I don't have it directly in front of me. Actually, I might have it in my chat notes. Let me take a quick look. Yes, you were talking about the psionically linked schooling fish. And yeah, I think that's a really good idea. So let me move back to... Here we go. So jellyfish, schooling... small fish, and then we want to have psionic schooling fish. And what will be unique about these is that they use psionics to adjust their school configuration to handle threats and challenges. Okay, what else have we got coming from chat? Sunfish. Plankton feeders tend to be either really tiny or absolutely massive. That's very true, and I do think we need to put some massive ones in. Yes, 7 Blue 7, we will figure out a way to make butter a thing. Jelly farts. Kai! Floating jellyfish will be bobbing fish. Bobbies. We are not making nun milk on Shoal. I know where this is going, chat. No. No nun milk. That's for tormenting Iden with. I think if I got ants at the sea, I want actual ants at the sea. Probably have to import butter. That might be the easiest way of doing it. Idea for fish. Preyfish that moves in huge groups. On the other hand, a carnivorous fish that also move in huge groups, but that looks exactly like preyfish. So, mimic fish. They hunt by luring in large carnivore fish and swap a few lost of their own for being able to strip a huge carnivore piranha style. That's a really cool idea. That is a really, really cool idea. Let me grab that and slot it in here. It would help if I didn't open the wrong browser. Everybody has like at least 2 browsers on their computer, right? I'm not weird. And this came from fan art, so we will definitely implement that. That'll be something I can write up during the week. Okay, so we were talking about some big filter feeders. I feel like having some form of giant turtle that can support its own small ecosystem on its back that just skims through the shallow oceans might be a cool idea. We did talk about that at some point. The other option, of course, well, no, hippos wouldn't be filter feeders. But I do feel like we need to have some giant kind of turtle. Coral mimic octopi. I really like that idea. That's a great idea. I don't know that whales would be a great idea for the shallow water, but I do want to bring something like that in for deeper water for sure. And of course, if we're going to go with turtles, one of the things that turtles in real life, some of the coolest turtles that we have for real, is the loggerhead turtle, which has like fingers for flesh through the inside of its throat because they eat jellyfish. It means that anything that goes in can't come back out due to the water environment that they eat in. Loggerhead turtles are really cool. And they could eat the jellyfish as well as having maybe a filter feeder one. What do you guys think? Squeaker fish, like a puffer fish, but moves quickly by rapidly sucking in water, then pushing out the back like a jet. That's another really good idea, and they would be great for living among the coral. Let me grab that idea as well. I will need to go to, yes, here. Squeaker fish, there we go. You need to have at least one turtle species, if for no other reason than you need it for a giant jellies could be an ecosystem as well. I'm kind of curious to see what we can do with the jellies that are live in the atmosphere and doing that sort of thing with them. But you're right, Subnautica Below Zero, seeing as we've been talking about Subnautica today, in Below Zero they have a giant vent jellyfish that positions itself over volcanic vents, and the interior of the jellyfish is its own biome. Which is a pretty cool idea, but Subnautica did already do it. Flying and swimming turtle. Use a way for them to weld aside from high energy arc welding. We need special environments so they don't electrocute themselves. Yeah, when we get to how the hell does technology work in this setting, that's going to be interesting. But we do have land masses available, so maybe that will affect some of how some of these things are available, what's rare and what isn't, what can be done where, and etc., and what those lands are therefore mostly used for. Starfish. Yes, starfish are a great idea. We will definitely need some starfish. They are great to live among corals and sponges as well as on sandy bottoms. Quite so, Pip. You like that idea too? My goodness, boy. He has opinions. Kelpfish. Looks like kelp with the mouth near where the roots would be. Can remain camouflaged while feeding. Slow but very low energy usage. Yeah, they're like little pipe fish in real life, only instead of under the sand, they're above it. Alright, let's grab that one. We are doing a good job of lots of potential prey species here. I like this. Alright, let's take a look at some of what we pulled up last week as well and see. So we did talk about some shark equivalents. I think we need to have some normal sharks, and epaulette sharks were suggested. But we did also talk about mesmer sharks. They eat coral, so they hum and can disorient. I think we'll need to give them their own name though, because the reason we called them mesmer sharks is we were once again borrowing from Subnautica. Throw in something weird like that shard with the spiral mouth. Let's go up here. Some spiral mouthed critter that grinds up coral reefs. We'll definitely put one of those in and we'll probably give it a shell. Because why not? Alright, what else have we got? Small humanoid starfish would be great for royal guards or soldiers. Yeah, starfish regenerating is both fascinating and terrifying. Barnacles and anemones, yeah, we'll definitely do those. Some of these might come into the herbiary rather than the bestiary. Lemon sharks, sponge forests. Siren eels. We did talk about swarming eels. What is your concept for the siren eel? Right, I know I need to rename mesmer sharks when I do this right up this week. Mesmer sharks use psionics to disorient prey. Right, what have we got? Spiral-toothed shark. Yep, but again, anything that I miss, anything you want me to be aware of, you can always throw it in the Discord chat. Bonehead sharks, named for the giant plates on their heads that let them bite off coral chunks and grind them up. We were talking about having placoderms, armoured fish, last week. So yeah, a bonehead shark could be a very potentially useful. Bonehead shark. I can spell, it's fine, I'll fix it later. Placoderm, coral eating shark. Okay, let's see what else we got. Siren eels will dull their play via coral song and then strike when in range. Use coral song to lure in prey. Strike from ambush. Yeah, it's a starfish loyal to protagonists rather than against them is, yeah, good idea. Siren eels will be like Car from the Jungle Book. No spelling allowed. Yeah. One of my biggest secrets as a writer is spelling and grammar were never something that I was ever brilliant at. I had to go to special classes purely for that when I was about 12, 13, because turning words like chop into chopping, I'd always get it wrong. So I've never been that great at it. And part of it is because I'm always in a rush to get the ideas in my head onto the paper. without fully seeing the word in my head before I start typing it, because I have weird brain. I have the piece of paper to prove it. So I use technology to cover for me. The program you guys are seeing me use is called Scrivener. It is my absolute favourite writing program. I will shill it to everyone and anyone until the cows come home. It's absolutely brilliant. Categorically the best writing software out there for any creative writing that you might be doing. And I also use, in conjunction with that, Grammarly and Hemingway Editor, because between them they will pick up all of my spelling mistakes, all of my grammar mistakes, and all of the times that I've used adverbs way more than I should have. And then I can pretend like I'm a professional writer and know what I'm doing. Blackfire Gaming, I know Aiden mentioned something very similar to that last week as well. The concept of something that excretes rare metals or gems from what it's eating. I definitely think that that's a great idea. Gem excreting molluscoid. We will pop that in as well. Yeah, reading and writing are very different skill sets. There's a reason why the two are, you know, separate things. It's very easy to read things, but not necessarily to translate that directly into writing them, and it can go vice versa as well. I pronounced a lot of things in my young life incorrectly because I'd only seen the words written down and never heard them pronounced. So that made reading aloud a challenge, and I had to be corrected quite often. Okay, let's go over what else we've got from last week's notes that we think should be here. Shallow ocean shark equivalents. Yeah, we looked at that. Mesmer sharks. So for our bonehead shark that's going to have the protection on it, one of the things we talked about last week was perhaps having some kind of symbiotic coral that would live on some creatures. Maybe that's one of the species where that happens. At least you aren't missing half your teeth, Red. I mean, you don't know that. You're right, but you don't know that. Yeah, manual writing before the typewriter and computers were invented. Just, oh goodness. Dome rays, a lab-grown species made to transport non-aquatic off-worlders to visit their cities. I definitely want to look at stuff when we do that, because back when I was first conceptualizing Shoal, before I ever knew I'd be doing it as a community project, I was envisioning the Titans as being a whole range of different mecha craft, not just mechs themselves. And one of the early ones that I thought of would be some kind of sort of jet ski like equivalent that was ray shaped, that was used for transporting off-worlders. But having it be a lab-grown species is very interesting as well. We will put that in there as a thought. Hearing an audiobook, and yeah, it's one of the things that's always hard with audiobooks. They can be a great way to digest literature, especially when you're short on time. You can listen to it while you're on the road or whatever. But yeah, you do then end up with, well, that's not how that character sounds in my head. That's not how I pronounce their name. You're wrong. Small thin shark with bony blade at the end of its tail for hunting. Yeah, we could definitely just for that. Right, where are we at? Okay, we're going to run out of time. Let's go down our list and see if we need to knock any of these out. We said we wanted ridiculous tunneling gobies of some kind. I think we still need to keep gobies. They're a good foundational species. Tunneling gobies. We did talk about potentially having schools of piranha shrimp. Now, I know we've said about having mimic fish already. We've got the mimic octopi. We've got the psionic schooling fish could be a thing. But I think having a predatory shrimp species that looks like normal shrimp, but once you get close enough, they're voracious little predators and will swarm you like piranha. I think that might be quite a good idea. Do we want to keep that one? I thought that fantasy monsters were called Chris until he was a teenager. Yeah. If you think about genetic modified creatures would be more efficient for mundane things, or metallurgy is difficult. Yes, that's very true. Biology is probably something that's... biology is probably pursued more than some of the other sciences because it's just so much more relevant for the sort of world that we're building. Definitely something to keep in mind as we go on. Piranha shrimp in harsher areas. Okay, so not just a general shallow species. Maybe there's something we have up in the polar regions. Shallow polar regions. Which would also allow for them to be a bit bigger than they perhaps natively would be, because the cold does tend to lead towards bigger creatures. Okay, let me pop into the... so it's still going to be shallow ocean, but it's going to be polar. So let me come down here. Polar. We're going to put the piranha shrimp in the polar region. Because it does also make sense when you've got a more extreme environment to want to make use of being a predator for easier energy consumption at times. Especially if you're luring things in. We've included the swarming eels. I still like the idea of hippo-equivalent commune animals that have their own biosphere. We'd said that they'd be hunted by gigabirds and they'd probably have their own small bird species that lives exclusively on them. Do we have giant manta ray kind of things yet? We do not. Do we want some giant manta rays? Biodiverse hippo idea. I'm kind of keen on that. So we've got two choices of what we could do with the hippos. We know that on our land masses we're going to have some stonking huge lake ecosystems. So we could make the communal hippos a freshwater thing and restrain them to land like on Earth, where their terrifying horrors can only cause problems for but so many people. Or we can let them be an ocean-going species and an everyone problem. Which would we rather do? Pistol shrimp shooting real bullets. I don't think they have a license for that. What do we think with the hippos? Freshwater or an everyone problem? Giant slow manta rays could be a good mini ecosystem candidate. They could. Hippos are an everyone problem. I'll tell you what, it's 5:10 and we need to make sure we get out of here by 5:15 so that Tex doesn't send me to the cargo mines. Why don't I do a poll and we'll finish this here for this week, and then next week we'll do another biome and balance it. Let me do a poll. Poll. Weird alien hippos. Land-based problem? Everyone problem? Literally everyone problem. We'll let them live in both. Right, let me fit the whole word problem in. Okay, I will allow additional votes. We will run this for 2 minutes. So our poll is going to be weird alien hippos. Should they be a land-based problem on our freshwater lakes? Should they be an everyone problem in the ocean? Or should they be a literally everyone problem and live in both zones? just dangle some machine gun parts at Tex. That'll distract him long enough. Yeah, I'll have to bear that in mind. Yeah, ripping some basic prey from Earth as need be. Yeah, filling in some gaps with just the familiar, the staid, the tried, the true and tested is never a bad thing. I mentioned earlier the Final Fantasy XIII problem of too many weird and wacky things with weird and wacky names and no frame of reference for the audience, and it just becomes white noise that you don't pay any attention to. We want to avoid that. Hippos are a type of pig. Pigs will get everywhere there's food given long enough. That's very true. Littoral is in shallow water near shore environment. They could be like sea lions or walruses. Just make big ass leopard seals. We could make big ass leopard seals. We are not making the hippos fly. They're a big enough problem as they are. We're not flying. It does look like land-based is running out. You've got a little bit of time left. You can throw goob at this problem, ladies and gentlemen. Throw goob at it as you choose, but at the minute it looks like they're going to be a freshwater problem. Three evolutionary strains, one armoured terrestrial variant, one familiar amphibious one, and one seal-like aquatic one. We're not having hippo crabs. They already have water and land, they're not getting the air. I agree. What about a sea bear? We absolutely need to have a sea bear. I don't know whether that will count as a transitional species or not, but I definitely want to have some bear equivalents and see what interesting things we can do with them. We need to stop having goob votes. This is the first goob vote I've done in a long, long time. The next one will not be a goob vote. Have you seen how hippos poop? We don't want them airborne. I agree. We do not want airborne hippos. That would be terrible. Okay, so we are going to have our hippos be a land-based problem. All right, let me put them into... they'll be a temperate land species. Communal hippo nonsense is going to go in there. Okay. All right, well, I think we got some good work done today. Chat, we did good. We did very, very good. We've balanced one ecosystem. We will have more to do. We didn't get to doing leviathans today, but we will come back to them. They will absolutely happen, and perhaps that will be easier to do after we've gotten a little bit further through. Just realised I'm looking at that and it's not telling me I'm live. Oh good, it's just lying to me. Twitch is just lying to me. Orcas are a bit too big for shallow ocean. Yeah, I do want to look at whale species and whale equivalent. We might need to, and there's nothing stopping us from adding things in over the week. I'm going to be trying to shift my schedule so that over the weekend I work on writing up Shoal stuff from Fridays, and that will then give you guys the week to make comments on what's gone on to the PDF, add things that you think should be on there, tell me things that you think don't fit and we can take it away, because we don't have to limit ourselves just to this couple of hours that we've got. I've pinned the Discord link up there, which will take you to where all of the Shoalnanigans are going to be on the orcs. Very happy to chat with you guys there. Keep building this, keep doing the thing. And yeah, we'll see where we get to with it. And hopefully by the end of the year, we'll have a fully fleshed setting that we can write in. I genuinely love both. One, that you guys put up with me and my nonsense. Two, that you're willing to entertain all of these crazy ideas. And three, that you just bring so many awesome ideas of your own. I didn't know how doing a writing stream was going to go when I proposed the idea, and it has been genuinely heartwarming to see how passionate you guys are about all of this. I will pet the puppies as soon as I am off stream. I'm going to go and give them some food, give them something to eat, let them make a complete mess of their enclosure, as they usually do. I do then have a little bit of my normal work to do tonight, and then over the weekend I will update the PDF, and you guys will be able to see where we've got to from this week, ready for next week, when I think we'll be doing some more development, and we'll see what thing I want to rant about in my opening hour, which should be a good time. You want me to go and pet the pups while you can see? Oh, I tell you what, I'll go and take their food into them, and then I'll finish stream so that I don't get yelled at, and then I'll give them big pets after they have happy bellies. Give me just a moment, I'll go get their food. There we go. Eating puppies. We've discovered that a mini muffin tin is the easiest way to make it so they space themselves out so they can all eat. What were the writing programs that I said I used? My main writing program is called Scrivener, which you can try for free for a whole month of use, as in literally 30 days, not just from the 1st to the 31st, to see if you like it. I've just typed what it's called in chat. It's very, very good. I adore Scrivener. And then in support, I use Grammarly and Hemingway Editor, which are their own little apps or in-browser equivalents, to allow me to copy and paste my text, and it will point out to me, hey, dum-dum, you've used like 50 adverbs in the course of like 2,000 words, and that's way too many. And highlight where they are so I can go and adjust my writing. And it picks up on spelling and grammar as well. Yeah, Scrivener is just, it's an amazing writing program. I cannot recommend it enough. Absolutely adore Scrivener. It does have a really good free trial. It doesn't cost the end of the world to purchase if you decide that you like it, and your license is a forever license. So once you pick it up, you own that program for good. It's not a subscription. So I do recommend checking it out if you are interested in a new writing program. Right, with that said, I need to get out of here. It's been a wonderful time with you guys, as it always is. I still maintain that we do, in fact, have literally the best community on all of Twitch. And there are many ways that you could choose to start your Friday, and I'm very, very touched that you guys choose to spend it with me and with all the other chaotic things that will go on over this weekend, from the BPL, the orcs, and all of the other nonsense that we get up to. So have a wonderful weekend, chat. Thank you for starting it with me, and I hope you have a great time. I will catch you next time.